You know the American dream? Well, it turned into an absolute nightmare. There was no war, no big warning, just a total financial collapse that sent the entire country spiraling into a decade of hunger and dust. So, the big question is, how did it all go so wrong so fast?
And this wasn't some dramatic headline. For millions of people, this was their actual reality. Just try to imagine it. Your life savings, your home, your whole future, just gone in a single day. This quote, it really gets to the heart of the personal terror behind all the economic statistics.
Okay, let that number sink in for a second. $200 billion. Adjusted for today's money, that's how much wealth just vanished. It didn't go to someone else, it just ceased to exist. That is the unbelievable scale of the disaster we're about to unpack.
But, before the crash, there was the party. A huge one. They called it the Roaring '20s. It was a decade of just explosive growth, a cultural revolution, and this widespread belief that the good times were literally never going to end.
I mean, the whole decade was an economic rocket ship. Factories that had been building tanks for the war were now churning out things like toasters and radios. And for the very first time, you could buy a car or one of those new radios with an installment plan, buy now, pay later. By 1929, 10 million homes were tuning in to hear jazz. And Wall Street? Oh man, the Dow Jones quadrupled in just 5 years. It really seemed like there was no ceiling.
And this right here, this shows you the engine behind the whole boom. Innovations like Henry Ford's moving assembly line were a complete game changer. They cut the time it took to build a Model T from 12 hours down to just 90 minutes. That explosion in productivity just rippled through the whole economy, fueling demand for everything from steel to rubber to oil.
Now, if the assembly line was the engine, this was the rocket fuel for the stock market bubble. It's called buying on margin, and it meant you could put down just $10 to control $100 worth of stock. The rest, it was a loan from your broker. It's an incredibly powerful tool called leverage, and it seemed like a foolproof way to get rich quick, as long as prices kept going up. But what if they didn't?
This quote is just perfect. It comes from a barber who was busy giving out stock tips while he was cutting hair. It just shows you how widespread this fever had become. Shoeshine boys, bellhops, suddenly everyone was an expert. The market wasn't really about a company's actual value anymore, it was all about the vibes. And the vibes were immaculate, right up until they weren't.
And then, just like that, the music died. October 29th, 1929, Black Tuesday. The party came to a sudden, violent, and absolutely catastrophic end. In a single day, $14 billion of wealth just disappeared. The ticker tapes that printed stock prices fell hopelessly behind. On the floor of the exchange, traders were screaming, some were even fainting. The optimistic roar of the 20s was just swallowed by the stunned silence of total financial ruin.
It was a perfect storm, really, a catastrophic domino effect. So first, the market crashes. Then, the brokers issue what are called margin calls, demanding investors pay back their loans immediately. But the investors are broke, they can't pay. So that makes the bank loans to the brokers totally worthless. And suddenly, the banks themselves start to fail.
This quote from a panicked bank teller, well, it says it all. As the news spread, people literally ran to their local branches to pull out their life savings. These bank runs spread like wildfire, and thousands of banks, which remember, had been gambling with their customers' money, they just collapsed, taking entire family fortunes down with them.
And this crisis didn't stop at the water's edge. Panicked US banks started calling in all their loans to Europe, and that triggered a global chain reaction. In just 3 years, the value of world trade was cut in half. The main artery of the global economy was completely choked off.
So yeah, this was no longer just a Wall Street problem. The financial collapse was spiraling into a decade of just profound, widespread human suffering.
And this was the official message coming out of Washington. President Hoover tried to project calm, assuring Americans that prosperity was just around the corner, but for millions of people sitting at empty dinner tables, those words just rang completely hollow.
In fact, Hoover's name became synonymous with the misery. The shanty towns that people built from scrap wood and cardboard, they were dubbed Hoovervilles. Newspapers that people used for warmth became Hoover blankets, and empty pockets turned inside out, those were called Hoover flags. It was a really brutal public verdict on how he was handling the crisis.
The numbers here are just staggering. In 1929, unemployment was at a healthy 3%. By 1933, it had skyrocketed to 25%. Think about that. 1 out of every 4 Americans who wanted a job could not find one. The engine of the American economy had completely seized up. And behind all those numbers was a devastating human reality. You had breadlines snaking through cities for blocks. Teachers were watching their students literally faint from hunger in the classroom. The suicide rate surged. People just stopped getting married or having kids because they couldn't imagine a future. And, as if all that wasn't enough, an environmental catastrophe, the Dust Bowl, turned the Great Plains into sand, forcing millions to become refugees in their own country.
But then, in 1933, there was a dramatic change. A new president, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, arrived, and he had a totally new philosophy, not denial, but direct, massive government action.
In his first inaugural address, FDR delivered this iconic line. And it was so much more than a speech. It was a signal to the entire country that the government was finally going to fight back. For the first time in years, it offered a flicker of hope.
And fight he did, with this flurry of programs that became known as the alphabet soup. And these weren't just handouts, they were jobs. The CCC put young men to work in conservation. The WPA hired millions to build massive public works like roads and schools. And crucially, new agencies like the SEC and the FDIC were created to police Wall Street and ensure bank deposits. Basically to build guardrails so something like this could never, ever happen again.
So what were the results? Well, the New Deal was not some magic bullet. By 1939, unemployment was still at a painful 17%. But, and this is a big but, the free fall had stopped. The economy was actually growing again. You could say the patient was off life support and was slowly, painfully beginning to heal.
As the 1930s came to a close, America's factories were humming again. But the assembly lines weren't just churning out cars and toasters anymore. Now they were making helmets, boots, and ammunition. The nation was recovering, just in time to face an entirely new kind of global crisis.
You see, the Great Depression didn't really end with a parade. It ended with blistered hands, a whole new set of regulations, and a fragile, hard-won hope. It fundamentally reshaped America's relationship with its government and with capitalism itself. The nation had survived its greatest economic test, only to step onto the stage of a world that was about to be consumed by war.